as we know, the huge energetic shifts taking place affect us in different ways, both collectively and individually, based on our level of conscious awareness. And as I have previously stated, in addition to my writings, my primary mission focuses on the transformation initiatives, and its leaders and influencers. However, each of us integrating with our respective higher selves as multi-dimensional angelic humans, provides mutual benefit for all participants in this ascension process. With this in mind, I am sharing some perspectives and insights, while not new, may still be of some use for those along their respective journeys. In some ways, this could be considered a follow-up to the Ascension First Steps self-coaching guide I shared some months ago, but that will of course depend on an individual's perspective. My sense is also that anyone reading this most likely already possesses the key component for undertaking this personally challenging, demanding, but ultimately incredibly rewarding journey, a degree of self-motivation. Each of us who has been guided to this undertaking has done so for some purpose, even if we may not yet know what that purpose is. And whether guided, nudged, or pushed, no matter, it still requires an enormous amount of character and courage to take that first step to conscious awareness. We already understand that judging someone else, regardless of our beliefs, makes no sense, because we may have no idea of the circumstances others have chosen as their path. What we can do is offer the same as what we would like to receive: unconditional love, respect, and compassion. And if we are able, like some of us are, serve as a guide for support on the physical plane, in cooperation with entities and beings from the higher realms, benefiting from their much larger perspective. And that is my intention. I will approach this from what could be seen as top-down, meaning from the state of consciousness desired, and then how it may be attained. Saying how only outlines basic steps or stages, not sequence or necessarily priority. As unique individuals, we will experience this process in the best ways for ourselves as guided by our higher selves. And as always, consider only what resonates with you at this time. To be clear, this is not intended to be comprehensive in any way. It is based on my own experience, and from those who I am connected to, and have guided or supported in some way. The basic outline of this journey to our true nature through conscious awareness is deceptively simple. The complexity enters when you consider that humans are very usually complicated organisms through our individual uniqueness. And so while we focus on the same outcome, actually the only one possible, because we are only remembering that which we already are. Each of us will go through this venture from soul to spirit in our own way, for which you cannot buy a map. It must be emotionally experienced to be internalized. Phoning it in is not an option. The human experience is to live in separation. And as such, we must individually, and personally, traverse the landscape prepared uniquely for ourselves. It is not enough for others to relate their experience. Ultimately we must create our own version in order to satisfy the constant need we have to personalize and validate our existence. And therein lies our challenge. Managing your expectations plays an all-important role. This process of going from identifying yourself as a separate unique individual, to a multi-dimensional being, recognizing that we are all energetically connected, is often much more difficult than many could imagine. Consider how committed you are to your spiritual evolution. What does that mean to you, both in words and in practice? To be your authentic, genuine self, at all times, in any situation, is a necessity for this consciousness-raising process. That is what your higher self will be focused on. Meaning that the experiences along your path will support this in every way. Whatever that may mean for you, some change is inevitable. Understanding this at the outset can provide some frame of reference for what you encounter and why. And generally, While we might theoretically understand the need for change, we may not often react well to it in practice. Alarms will be signaled by the parts of yourself that are threatened by any changes to the status quo they have not initiated. And the part of you that has agreed to undertake this journey may be surprised by this. This is why managing expectations at the beginning can preclude problems later. When the internal dissenting voices constantly remind you that nothing is happening, or better yet, nothing good for you is happening. For those who have yet to experience this, it may sound a bit overdramatic, and even silly. But be forewarned, depending on the life experience that was chosen, you may be quite surprised how attached you have become to parts of your life that may come under scrutiny, and be marked for elimination. As well, the self-discovery aspect to your true and higher self is continuous. As you have no doubt already read, and may have knowledge of yourself, we are complex onion-like beings, uncovering layer after layer. And our perspective of what we think and feel continually aligns, reinforcing the idea that what you see depends on where you sit, or in this case, your level of conscious awareness. This is not said to discourage you, for because of the tremendous influx of energies, and now having many who have already paved the way, it is now much easier. There are also very many support resources available to any who ask for them. But remember, we are still dealing with our unique personal identities, and while you may be on board, understand that a lifetime of values, beliefs, habits, relationships, etc., will be impacted. The issue of trust arises. You must absolutely trust that the changes guided by your higher self and other guides that occur, are always for your highest good. But you are ultimately the chooser. While we often feel compelled to follow some guidance, we are not obligated to. The fact that people find themselves reliving versions of an area or issue where they are stuck, is clear evidence of this. And in those types of situations, the change needed may be to a personality characteristic or trait, so fundamental to the way that you currently see yourself, addressing it may require deep and thorough self-examination. Consider these factors. They are why managing your expectations can forestall resistance, or potential unwelcome surprises before they begin. As we become more of our higher selves, and increase the amount of light in our bodies, we leave the lower dimensions. We are more in the world, than of the world. And as that continues, your patience with lower dimensional reality will be less and less. In truth, we are expanding to multidimensional beings, but the contrast of the lighter energy, which is much more comfortable, becomes clearer. This is also a time where we may feel a bit schizophrenic. As we straddle the lower and higher energies, we may seem to be a different person to those around us. While we ourselves are confused by our emotional swings and temperament. Feeling quite happy or calm without any external cause, and at other times having very strong negative emotions that threaten to burst out of you, in reaction to perhaps mundane or quite normal situations. The feeling of calm and satisfaction is a sign of the increasing light within your being. And to integrate even more is where your higher self is pushing you. Remember, we are never done. Just because you passed a big hurdle in consciousness, does not mean that the next hurdle is not waiting. The impact of this physically, emotionally, and mentally can be significant. That is why consciously recognizing this as something that you really want, from your experiencer self, is important. Eventually we will let go, and rise above everything in the lower energies. But it must be a conscious choice, and you must reprogram yourself, and your thoughts and emotions to accommodate this change. In a way you are not in charge anymore. Releasing and just accepting that can make things much easier. The other change is about trusting implicitly. It is necessary, but if you are not there, be consciously aware of this. The issues will always be about our human selves. That is why seeing yourself as your higher self is a part of this shift. And never forget, this is a process. To begin, I will offer this statement which can be used as a barometer. I surrender to my higher self, for my highest good. When individuals are able to say this sincerely, their lives will change for their highest good in surprising ways. But no strong ego will ever allow someone, under their protection, to make such a statement. This becomes a measuring tool to see where the ego mind and fear impede any spiritual progress. Another key point is if the process and events are taking place with or without conscious awareness. Meaning, is there some understanding of what may be taking place from a spiritual perspective, or is it trying to be measured or compared to a known experience, which comes from a lower vibrational frequency? More light is affecting us continually. Being consciously aware and able to take advantage of this, allows us to raise our consciousness faster. Let me briefly return to the statement about surrendering to your higher self. I say that it is a barometer, and it can be. But it does not necessarily measure someone's commitment or resolve to raise their consciousness. Having had personal experience with this, there are souls which have chosen extremely difficult paths to enlightenment, for various reasons. And letting go or surrendering, has been used as a trigger point for releasing perhaps lifetimes of karmic baggage. This sets the bar very high to overcome. And it may be those individuals who may need specifically targeted and longer-term support and guidance. And if they ask and permit it, they will receive this support for as long as it is required and desired. Perhaps not surprisingly, these souls may also be exceptionally powerful, talented, and gifted, who in turn, can be true inspirations for others. As part of our consciousness-raising process, there is a point to recognize that some key paradigm shifts are necessary. One of these is who we think we are, our human selves only, or truly spiritual multi-dimensional beings. And another significant one is consciously accepting, internalizing, and then acting on the new reality that nothing exists outside of ourselves. I will repeat this point because its significance cannot be understated. To really fully embrace these energies for what they are, it is not enough to accept them theoretically, but they must be internalized, so they become part of your being. That takes time and constant awareness of this acceptance. This refers to the reality that energy is everything, and everything is energy. Which means that raising of consciousness to incorporate and internalize the paradigm shifts, has a corresponding vibrational frequency which you anchor and becomes part of your being over time. That is to say, our lives are truly the manifestation of our thoughts and emotions. So that everything we think we see around us, or happening to us, we have created, consciously or unconsciously. Which also means that we always create our reality from the vibration level we hold inside of ourselves first. The physical manifestation, which we can actually see, then follows. But because this lower dimension is so dense, with its own strict rules based on physics, it is hard to imagine that this can be true. That is why we must look beyond what our physical senses are telling us. Now, you are probably wondering why I am leading in with these statements. For where some may be now, they are both particularly relevant. Our biggest challenge will always be our human selves, which will constantly need reassurance. For so long, it has been ingrained in us how worthless and weak we are. Of course, this was designed purposely to keep us from recognizing our true power. Now that period is over. We can also start to consciously look to, and listen to our hearts first. You may find that this takes some practice, but will be most beneficial for you in the long term. Listening to your heart when you feel uncomfortable or uncertain, can quickly calm you and dispel any unease. This life that we are leaving, focused on our brains and minds to analyze and make decisions. we should fully understand that it is our hearts that lead our paths now. Our rational minds and egos are products of our human selves, the key attributes that signify our separation from Source and all that is. The light growing inside of us, connecting us to our higher selves, flows from our heart center where feelings preside, and we know we are all one. As long as a sense of separation is dominant, we revert to our mind and egos, where fear, doubt, with only temporary bouts of satisfaction are found. It is a never-ending cycle. But we must step forward as our true selves, ultimately as multi-dimensional human angelic beings. And that is why raising our consciousness beyond our negative human emotions is so critical. And we must recognize that all the power we need has always been within us, and is enough. It is the moment to face yourself and ask the questions of how confident you feel about yourself. And consciously recognize that any fears and doubts belong to your human self. Ask yourself if there is any fear, and if so, of what? You are solely responsible for managing your ego, mind, thoughts, and emotions. While that would sound self-evident, what we find as we become to be more consciously aware, this is not always the case. There is a reason that you can hear people say, "My mind has a mind of its own." Because we are very complex entities, and in addition, for this ascension may be processing aspects or fragments of our larger soul, as well as past life and family issues, you cannot anticipate exactly what in your life may need to change. What you can do, however, is to choose how you approach this. And I recommend that you do so willingly, figuratively and literally with open arms. And trusting that your higher self, and other higher dimensional energies, are guiding you for your highest or greatest good. But make no mistake, your sense of personal identity will be challenged, and feel threatened. And those other aspects of yourself, like your ego and rational mind, know you intimately, and precisely where you are most vulnerable. Add in the constant mind chatter, and we can start to feel overwhelmed, and wonder how to make it stop. It is not until we start being consciously aware of our thoughts and emotions, do we realize just how much our life is basically on autopilot. That is why when we start to try and consciously direct our life, we realize that it may not be so easy. As well, many of us have either never learned, nor considered, the connection between mind and body. This is where there is recognition that you will need to reprogram your brain. The autopilot is because that is how your brain is wired from your repetitive thoughts, emotions, and actions. And your physical body reflects the results of this. Fortunately, our brains are able to be rewired to reflect the changes we consciously make as well, having a direct connection to our physical condition. These will be the focal points in our consciousness-raising process. As I have experienced, our human aspects are not yet capable of understanding what lies ahead, until we have more fully integrated, and in fact, surrendered to our higher selves. This part can be extremely difficult for us to let go of. So the shift is not just about accepting who you really are as your higher self, and internalizing this, but as well believing and trusting that there is some benefit for you to do so. With these energies swirling around and continually changing, it can be very confusing. What I would suggest is further trying to assess which aspects of yourself are reacting, and to what. I am referring to the process we can go through of consciously recognizing our various voices. For example, understanding when your ego is speaking. We all have these various aspects: ego, rational mind, mind chatter, experiencer, observer. Depending on the person, there can be more. The reason that can be important is that we are able to better understand how we might feel or think, depending on the interest of the voice. I would further suggest this as an exercise you can practice at any time on yourself. Make a concerted effort to be consciously aware of where your thoughts, emotions, and choices or decisions are emanating from. Catch yourself when you say "I think something," or "I feel something." In that moment, stop, and think, who is the I in that statement? The experiencer, ego mind, rational mind, or observer, etc.? Also consider your seemingly automatic decisions, choices, emotional and thought responses, that lead to outcomes and situations which may not actually benefit you. Should they be examined more closely, or updated to allow for more flexibility? This again may take some time to adjust to and incorporate, but it can be very revealing. You can also view a particular situation or circumstance from different perspectives yourself. You could say that the observer might offer a more objective viewpoint, perhaps without as much emotional fervor. Or perhaps from the vantage point of a third-person observer. This exercise can serve more than one purpose. The more you learn about your human self through self-discovery, the better able you are to pinpoint areas of resistance you might harbor. And as well, you can provide some internal defense against the dissenting voices inside. With the light increase you are undergoing, you will move into uncharted territory where your ego and mind will need to be calmed, perhaps quite frequently, for a time. When we are being tested, again and again, reading messages that this is for our highest good, and all will turn out for the best, while true, may be of small comfort. But we do have the tools in the form of meditation, affirmations, nature, animals, or whatever we feel is calming and supportive. As you may have already read, we need not try and avoid our negative feelings and emotions. That can actually cause more strain. Instead, accept and acknowledge them, but do not hold on to them. You can allow yourself to look deeper, understanding better the nature of their real cause, and ultimately understanding yourself better. In my own experience, comprehension of the triggers has proved extremely helpful and useful. A problematic area for some has been being open to forgiveness. Open yourself to forgiveness, for all others, regardless of the circumstances, and especially forgiving yourself. Maintaining or attempting to justify your rationale will not suffice. It will continue to fester until it is cleansed. Our humanity has tremendous flexibility and adaptability. It also allows us to delve into any moment we choose to, with an emotional intensity that can be beyond adequate description. And yet, these abilities can feel as though they are being used as weapons against us, in times of deep despair and helplessness. We can feel as though we have lost our center or core, leaving nothing to hold on to. And if the emotional response is from stress, anger, fear, and feeling powerless, it can lead to sometimes disastrous consequences, seemingly in the blink of an eye. It can be hard to remember at these times the overwhelming impermanence of our situations and events in this illusory existence. I remember clearly reading how we can always choose which moments we want to live in. One action born from anger or frustration can lead to essentially living in that moment for a very long time. As can one moment born from joy or love. I say this to be a reminder to ourselves, that when we are facing a situation we find uncomfortable or distressing, to ask this question of yourself: how long do I want to live in this moment? In the very midst of these times, it can seem like an eternity, because we are so focused on it. It eventually will pass, it is the nature of our reality. But it can be extremely difficult to remember this, particularly when we may need to most. And though our consciousness continues to rise, even when we recognize ourselves as multi-dimensional beings, we still retain our basic human emotions and responses. We have expanded, not lost our essential traits. Which means these moments can still come to us, albeit with a broader perspective and better tools to address them. What can be reassuring is acknowledging how by integrating with our higher selves, our center or core is never lost, because it is within us, and can always be felt by remembering that our essence is love. With enough life experience, we come to understand that at times we must just endure and survive. Not necessarily what anyone wants to hear, but nonetheless true. That is where the tools available to us from the higher dimensional sources are so needed. The affirmations, mantras, invocations, incantations, etc., via messages from various channels and other sources that resonate with us, can literally feel as lifesavers at some points. Because our thoughts and emotions create what we experience, keeping our vibrations as high as possible at all times, regardless of what is happening around us, is necessary, and not always easy to do. These affirmations, mantras, incantations, invocations, etc., can be used to not only raise our vibrations in a short period of time, they can also be used to quell your mind from lower vibration thoughts and emotions. As it has been written, to enable us to more easily change the channel in our heads. Find the best method that feels comfortable for you. If you ask your guides, they will present it for you. And then do not be afraid or feel uncomfortable. Using them in any situation, they can be useful or beneficial. I have repeated affirmations hundreds of times a day when I needed to. Remember, this is about what you need, not what others might think of it. As it is our human self that we must address, the more evidence we have, allows us to counter our rational mind and egos that we are only imagining changes taking place. These changes can be in the form of synchronicities, changes in habits, diet, moods, interactions and relationships with others. The recognition of angel numbers and the corresponding messages, may not only be a sign of the changes, but as well, provide significant information, guidance, and ongoing reassurance along the path. Self-care is of prime importance. Keeping it as a priority is basically mandatory. Taking time for yourself on a regular basis is highly recommended. Whether being positively selfish, in perhaps small ways alone, or choosing just to enjoy the companionship of others in a supportive energy environment. For connecting with our higher dimensional energies, most feel that meditating is the key. But keeping expectations from your human self about this is cautioned. You are connecting when you meditate, but you may have no conscious awareness of what happened during the meditation, which is very common. Meditating can be very difficult for some people to start, and then to practice on a regular basis. The ability to clear our minds, after a lifetime of normal day-to-day activity, where meditating was subtlety discouraged, can be frustrating. As I repeat in this message, do not let your own or others' expectations discourage you. It can take some time to find what works best for you, as there are different forms of meditating. If you have allowed it, you can ask your guides for help. Then look for, and pay close attention to the signs that will be made available for you. I understand that some people prefer other means of relaxing and being in a higher vibration, nature walks, yoga, being with animals, etc. My intent is not to measure this effectiveness, however, I have seen the positive results. What I can say, is that a regular practice of meditation is not only calming, but is healing, mentally and physically as well. For anyone on this path who may be struggling, finding the best meditation method for you, could be the solution you are seeking. Whatever you choose, having time for yourself, to just relax in quiet, process and digest during this ascension process, is a needed and worthwhile investment of your time. Recognizing that our emotions and thoughts are the fuel for what we create in our lives brings forth another issue. What are you fueling, or feeding yourself on a regular basis? I am speaking about the emotions, information, thoughts, and beliefs you consider that make you, you. Considering that it is all energy, what type of energy is it? You may have no doubt heard that focusing on the often negative mass media is probably not helpful. It can be addictive, and some feel unavoidable to some extent for their lives. But as you change through this process, you will find that what may have been acceptable in the past can become intolerable. This is the time to be consciously aware, because it is a prime opportunity for self-reflection. Your life is reflected all around you, it is your mirror. Consider this, and understand you can now consciously choose what energy you bring to yourself, or decide what no longer serves you. You are becoming more of your authentic, genuine self, leaving the mask and uncomfortable roles behind. As mentioned before, examples of changes taking place can be in the form of synchronicities, beliefs, values, diet, changes in routine, moods, interactions and relationships with others. I offer some questions that each can address for themselves. The reason for this is understanding that one of the most difficult and ongoing issues along this path is self-reflecting. We simply are not sometimes able to see ourselves objectively. And this can be very frustrating and dispiriting. Using techniques like questioning yourself, honestly, can serve as a way to be more conscious of the changes you are no doubt undergoing, but are not able to easily recognize. While we are always changing, some changes are much more dramatic than others. But at the same time, changes can take place so fluidly they are hardly noticed until some time later, and perhaps by someone else, or even coincidentally. When we are able to take some time though, and consciously be aware of these changes, it can provide much needed verification that indeed your investment in self-care and your spiritual practices are having an impact. We can also recognize evidence when we reread some article or material, and realize that our understanding and perception of a concept or idea is quite different from earlier. In those cases, we may have gone from the theoretical or abstract comprehension to the sense of knowing. Sometimes huge shifts can be almost anticlimactic because the process is so gradual. One day we realize something has really changed, the energy, and you feel different. You see things differently, but maybe it's a loss to explain how or why. Some questions you might ask yourself. In responding to these questions, listen to your heart for what you are feeling. Do your heart and mind agree? While you may know what you sense is the appropriate answer, it may not mean that it truly resonates with you at this time. And please be as honest with yourself as possible. Who do you think creates your reality? Who or what do you think you are? How important do you think your thoughts and emotions are? Do you believe that everything is energy? What do you believe is the strongest energy? What do you think fear does? Who or what do you think is managing or guiding your life? Where can you find the answers to your own life story? Understanding your purpose, or connecting with someone who can help you discover it, can be a huge motivator. Remember, however, trusting this information, and then moving towards it is still your choice. As in my own case, the clues to this purpose or role may be evident in the common threads of your life, but difficult to see without the wider perspective. For those of us who incarnated at this time with a specific purpose and life plan, comparing our lives with those of our contemporaries or peers can be self-torturous and demoralizing. It is another reason why self-discovery and connecting to your higher self can be so beneficial. When you are able to see the much larger context of your journey, you begin to realize that to compare yourself to others is fruitless. But until you reach this point of awareness, your ego and mind will gladly use your sense of failure in not having a partner, family, the right job or career, money, or other material attachments considered normal in the lower dimensions. For those dealing with these issues, it is not a pleasant experience, and can be a source of embarrassment and depression. And while you may personally recognize why your life plan was developed as it was, attempting to explain this to the uninitiated will most likely sound like an excuse. However, for those of us who are truly called to serve the greater humanity, service to others comes naturally, regardless of what others may think. And this calling gets stronger over time and with service. And as this is connected with our higher selves, and higher dimensional energies, it is also a strong motivator. Aspects of our personal identities may rebel against the changes brought by raising of our consciousness, and the resulting impact on our lives. But it can be through serving others that we are reminded why we chose this journey to begin with, and strengthen our resolve to continue it. In the midst of ascension symptoms, physical and emotional, we will often still make ourselves available for those who we may feel genuinely need us. Once again seemingly prioritizing someone else's needs over our own. But as we have already or will learn, that is not the case. When we follow our guidance and heart, we understand that our service is always for mutual benefit. And can be just what we need to get out of our own head. If you are really serious and committed to your spiritual path, and if you have not already done so, surrendering to your higher self for your highest good with sincere intent, is your first step. It is non-negotiable. How you reach this point, is in large part discussed in this writing. And I have tried to paint a realistic picture, hopefully not to discourage, but rather to allow you to manage your expectations. And managing our expectations is vital. The simplest way, but more difficult for many, would be to have no expectations. As was stated, not having done this before, we cannot very accurately assess if we are doing it right, where we should be, or recognize what progress is. That is a part of the trusting and letting go which your higher self knows is absolutely necessary for integration. Only your human self will attempt to measure, manage, or control this process. Which means this area will be a continual focus, with increasingly uncomfortable intensity, until you have raised your consciousness sufficiently to move beyond this. Although this part did not contain a lot of words, it can be the biggest obstacle to overcome. Living and working day to day in the lower dimensional frequencies can be exceptionally challenging. There can be no easy way out and away from the predominant energies and emotions. And despite being motivated, having the mental and emotional energy or strength on a regular basis, for your spiritual and self-care practice or regime, can suffer. If you ask for support from the higher realms, it will always come, many in unexpected ways, when truly needed. Your role will be to be open and trusting of the guidance and support, in whatever form may come forth. Which means prioritizing your spiritual and self-care activities. Consider that your investment will at minimum have a corresponding return. I have stated how important the integration and internalizing of the paradigm shift is. Here is why, when you accept and internalize that your essence is love, and that you, and everything else, is an expression of this energy of love, the way you look at life changes. By accepting that you are a conscious expression of love, which is eternal, the idea of separation no longer has power over you. Because everything is of the same energy, and energy only changes form, it does not die. There is much about our ascension process, which our human minds are not able to adequately grasp. But the understanding that energy is everything, and everything is energy, is not one of them. Consciously internalizing this understanding, as was written about previously, may provide you with the impetus to more fully commit yourself to embracing your true powerful creator and manifestation gifts. More light is integrating with us, and our environment continually. The energy has changed in heretofore unimaginable ways for our ascension, providing us opportunities to exist in the higher dimensions, while maintaining our human bodies, which was never before available. All of us are pioneers for the cosmos. But as usual with pioneers, there is a cost of being on the leading edge. And that is where our respective journeys come in. Our success must be both individual and collective, and we must support one another accordingly. It is the uniqueness of our individuality that we honor and fight for, which must recognize that it is not being lost as we integrate with our higher selves. Rather, that aspect must come to realize that it expands in wondrous ways, by releasing the lower vibrational energies, and connecting more fully with its spirit self, as part of an even greater whole. It is only returning home, but with its multifaceted emotionally internalized experiences, unforgettable adventures, revelatory knowledge, and invaluable wisdom, adding to our consciousness conglomeration. This is a journey from the illusion of separation to wholeness. And we must continually remind our human selves, despite its disbelief, that it is one we willingly chose. And this is the gap that I am referring to in the title of this writing. For when we are able to close this gap, our focus shifts from the day to day, to the anticipation and promise that we truly are sovereign, co-creator beings, who no longer need to endure anything we do not choose to. That we really are the masters, we have heard repeatedly from the higher realms. We are able, slowly, to establish the emotional distance to create our own sacred space, and yet marvel that we live in unity consciousness and in harmony. The promise fulfilled of leaving duality and separation behind. In love and light. Archangel Chamuel.